Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome back to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a functional adult and a raging dumpster fire. And some days, we're heavy on the dumpster fire. Joining me today inside the Bachelor Pad is Kari Assoignon. Guys, I'm super excited for this episode today. Kari, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us. There is this quote on your website, and I really just wanted to ask you about it. I believe it said, reclaim your pleasure and power. That's a word I feel like a lot of people don't use too much nowadays, pleasure. So we hear a lot about reclaiming your power, but never so much about your pleasure, your happiness. So can you tell me what kind of motivated that?
Yeah, awesome. First off, thank you for having me on. I'm super happy to be here and share with your audience as well. So I am a conscious dating coach and a pleasure coach. I work with women, and I work around female sexuality as well. And that's a big piece of it. A lot of women tend to give everything to everyone else, and they don't actually get to embrace any joy or pleasure or anything in their own lives. So that's where I kind of come in and help women connect to their bodies and learn what pleasure feels like for them. Society tells us a lot about like what it should be, what we should expect for sex or pleasure or anything along those lines. And I work with women to discover that themselves, what brings them pleasure in their day-to-day life, and then how to like build on that so that every day you're adding pleasure to your own life, right? And just reclaiming that back is your right. Like your birthright is to enjoy your life as you're doing it instead of just giving it away to everyone else. So
I mean, that's amazing. That's poetic in a sense. And I think that's something that we can all relate, that there is especially in today's age where women's pleasure is put on the back burner because, like you said, they give so much of themselves in every other aspect. Nobody really takes the time to stop and make sure they're fulfilled. So I'm glad that you were giving countless women the space and the opportunity to reconnect with themselves and just light that fire. Obviously, you have to have had a passion for this to get started. But I feel like there's a story there. What was your main motivation in even getting into this space?
yeah, thank you. And I love it. I feel like everybody has a story on how they get there, right? And so for me, I grew up in a very small community with like 2,000 people, and I had a great identity, a great community, all of that. And then I went away to college and moved to the big city. And then I had no sense of self, and I didn't know how to develop that. So I was just a chameleon being what I thought everybody wanted me to be. I was going to school for, a job that was going to pay well and do all these things. And I just was completely disconnected from any of the things that lit me up. And I was listening to everyone else. And that went into my dating life as well. I was constantly trying to adapt to what I thought they wanted me to be. And so over time and through attracting bad partnerships and then kind of like just going through a place of, I ended up in a narcissistic relationship that was really toxic and really difficult to get out of just because it had beat me down so hard mentally and emotionally that I got to the point that was my breaking point pretty much, and just thought there's got to be more. So I just went on this like, I basically gave up everything, sold everything, and moved across the country. So I was out on the West Coast, and now I'm out on the East Coast in Canada, and started a new life and just focused on me. And at that point, I met my current partner now, and he just gave me this profound sense of safety and belonging and the space to develop who I wanted to become. And so that's when I got into the tantric training around everything around sex, love, relationships, and basically the main focus was self. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell of how I got there. But I coach now for what was the journey that I went through.
And I mean, if you guys have been listening to this season, we started off with Dana Diaz, and we talked a lot about narcissistic relationships and not only how scary they can be, but really how much of yourself that you lose in the process of maintaining one and staying in one. So I'm just glad that you've made it out of that situation. And congratulations, we love here. So hearing that you now have a partner who is treating you well and just lighting up your life, kudos to that. It's a big thing. And people always ask me, what do I think is going to happen when I find my forever partner? Like, you won't have a bachelor pad anymore. I was like, you're right. We might have to rename the show, or hopefully we've done enough work where people might not need it anymore. That's always good. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they can listen to this for years and years to come. But so how do you think that's kind of reshaped your perspective here lately, now that you're in a healthier, happier relationship? Do you think that's kind of changed how you've worked with some of your clients,
Definitely.
helping them to rediscover themselves?
Yeah, my whole perspective at the start was just helping women reclaim themselves on any level. And I wasn't really for the conscious dating. It was kind of like repelling it actually for a while. There was signs from the universe that like, hey, and they just kept putting more people in my path that wanted to discuss that. And I was like, no, I don't think so.
Right.
And I was trying to steer away from it. And then finally it was a good conversation with a deep friend that was like, you've lived that path. Like that's who they want to learn from, right? Is how you got from that level to where you are now, knowing the relationship that I have now, right? And so it just changed my perspective, and I started opening up for that, right? That was the biggest piece, was accepting that was part of my journey, and that I can help other women on that path too. So
I mean, and that's always the first and biggest step, is acceptance. There are a lot of things that we try to fight day in. You're like, no, I have this clear vision of what I want, what I think is going to happen. And like you said, it just, so many doors open up. You're like, all right, well, now it's slapping me in the face.
yeah. And you're like,
this,
I need a sign. And then you're like, no, I need a signier sign.
and they're like, it's like, how much more of a sign can I be? I'm a sign on a sign saying, hey, look at this sign.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. Like, as soon as I stepped into that and actually accepted it as a piece of what I can offer, everything just kind of fell into alignment. Like, it was just like, it was easy. Whereas everything else had a bit more friction to it. This just came easy, and like people were coming to me easy, and it was an easy process for me because it's where I get purpose from too, right? Helping other women go on this journey. Like, it's so rewarding in itself. So
I've been saying this a lot more in my bartending gig. What is for you is for you. Like, nobody else can take it, is what I've been saying lately. And that really applies to not just your career or your dating opportunities, but just your path in life. No matter what we do, it may be delayed a little bit, but I was like, your journey is gonna be your journey. Nobody else can take that away from you.
Well, I think too, in this hustle culture, like everything is meant to come across as like, the more you're struggling, the more like successful you'll be, or what your version of success is, right? Is from the struggle and the grind and all of this. But when you actually take a step back and be like, let's let this flow. Let's let this be easy and see where it takes us as well, right? Like, yes, you can still put in the same amount of work, but when you're in a state of flow, it comes naturally, right? And so you get to be more creative, you get to have more fun and more joy into it, which is such a rare concept these days. So I love sharing that piece of it as well.
We talked about how you're all about reclaiming power and pleasure. Do you have some main components that you think are the keys to unlocking that connection to self?
I think it really depends on the person, but overall, on like a grander scale, I would say it really has to do with your conditioning and how you're brought up, and what kind of isn't serving you anymore from the beliefs that you had as a child, right? The type of family or situation that you grew up in, being able to sit with all of those and be like, hey, what do I want and what don't I want? Or how can I put this forward to make it fit for me, right? Turn it into a more personalized approach versus like, well, mom and dad always said this, or this is how I grew up with a single parent. Then, it's bound to happen that I'm going to be a single parent. So it's what your beliefs were and where they are currently. And some people have never even sat down to question those.
That's so true. I feel like we are conditioned in a sense to this idea of what we think is acceptable for us and what we think is just accepted in general. And when we actually take the time to think that life isn't cookie cutter and you can have a custom made journey or experience, what does that look like? And you're right. A lot of people don't take the time to think about that.
No, and I think that's where the whole conscious dating aspect of it comes in, right? Like, conscious dating is having that awareness, having presence, having awareness, like actually listening and not listening to respond, but actually listening to what that person is saying, right? There's different levels of listening that you can have in that. And then as you're going through it, like being able to, if you're having a conversation, something triggers you, not automatically telling that person, hey, you can't say that or do that because that triggers me. It's like, okay, well, why is this triggering me? And how can I work through this trigger? Right? It's a lot of the embodiment work and the actual going in and like working around and through those issues that can help you deepen into a relationship. But a lot of people just stop at being triggered and they don't take it the step further to do the actual inner work.
We talked about this a little bit before the shooting, is how can you, if you can't have a genuine conversation with yourself, how do you expect to make any progress or genuinely connect with anybody else out there?
It's crazy. Like for all of my clients, I'm always like, okay, I want you to approach dating as like your biggest self-love challenge. Like if you can't even date yourself, how can you expect others to provide for you the way you want to be provided for? Right. And they're like, oh, I never thought of it like that. You're like, yeah, like if you don't know what you want, if you don't have the clarity around that, which is your boundaries and everything else wrapped up in that, but it's just like, can you take yourself on a date? Can you treat yourself the way you want to be treated? Or are you just waiting for someone to come along and rescue you or save you or complete you?
And I love that. That's a really big thing that I've seen a lot in person and on. As much as I hate to say it, I am an avid TikTok user now. A lot on TikTok is people taking themselves, women especially, on solo dates, and I love that trend because that's something I've been doing for years. Is I don't need another person. Sometimes I just, I've had a day and I just want to do something nice for myself. Go out to a nice restaurant, have a good meal, a drink, whatever that may be, whatever I planned. So I think that you do in those moments start to realize that, you know what, I deserve this. And once you have that mentality, it's amazing how your perspective starts to shift.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things I see through the clients that I'm working with is the deservingness, worthiness piece. Like they'll either feel they're deserving of it, but not worthy, or vice versa. And it's such a fine line, but it's also like the most common theme of, if you don't feel that you're worthy of this, then that's where we need to start. Before you can even call in the one or however you want to do it, you have to have the worthiness of who you are as a person and what you can bring to the table to match the person you want to attract. Like there's so much ahead of time. And I think that people are just waiting for other people to come in and fix it for them. And so that's where I tend to start conversations.
Yeah. I always say this. Sometimes the most pure nuggets are the ones that are right in front of your face, the easy ones. And you're right, because if you don't think you're worthy or deserving of love, then you'll end up in really bad situations. Maybe you'll end up in a narcissistic relationship. Maybe you'll end up shutting everybody else out because you think you deserve to be alone, that you're too much or not enough for somebody. That's one thing I just want to squash in the butt right now. If you're listening to this, I tell everybody this. You are enough, okay? You don't have to pretend to be somebody else. Who you are authentically, genuinely, is enough. And for the right person, it'll be exactly what they're looking for.
And the world needs you. Like that's the thing, is the world needs authentic people to show up and to bring their truth, because they'll have creative ideas that no one else has come up with, or, there's always more that the world needs. And if you're just going to follow the cookie cutter, then you're not really contributing in the way that would serve your purpose. So,
and you can't also get mad when you get passed up or things don't go your way. I was like, when you are not being one of one and you're being one of 10,000, I was like, why? I mean, of course, somebody might pick the one before you or the one after you because you're all the same. And especially in this day and age where we live in such a visual, fast-paced social media culture where we are shown these images, these behaviors that are quote-unquote desirable and attractive to men or women.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this might be attractive for a certain set of people, but if it's not attractive to you, then it's not going to attract the person you want. If that made sense.
Yeah, no, it's true. And like attraction is just like the tip of the iceberg. Like, yes, you want to be physically attracted and sexually attracted to your partner, but then
Mhm.
long term, it's like, does this person meet my needs? Right.
Yeah.
One of the practices I get my clients to do is to sit down and write 2 lists. And it's like the first one is for the partner you want to attract. And it's like your needs list. Like, what do I need to have this person in my life long term? Right. And then you do the needs list and then you do the cherry on top kind of thing. Like, here's the cherry on
Right.
top, the physical looks, the money, the blah, 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 whatever that is. But what are the actual needs that you need to feel safety, love, and belonging in your relationship? Right. And then the second list is, what do you want the relationship to be? Right. What are the needs
Ooh,
of
yeah.
the relationship as a whole? Like, do you need it to travel? Like, do you need your partner to be able to travel with you? Do you need X amount of time alone? Do you need, like all these needs? And then again, with your relationships, what are your cherries on top? And then once you have that clarity, it's a lot easier to go into the dating world and be like, okay, does this match my needs list? Cherry on top are great. And they're like the surface things of, they have to look a certain way or whatever, but looks fade, right? So how important is a sense of humor compared to like your attraction will be there regardless as you age together.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be there if you have that
And
at the start. But after that, can they make you laugh? Can they hold you in rough times? Can you be your genuine self around them? Like those are more of the needs, right?
that's such a true statement that you made. I was like, nobody's gonna look the same in 5 or 10 years. Like, I was like, I already know that. And so
Exactly.
that's a really big thing that I do with some of my clients too. Is I love the saying that's been around for a lifetime is you want your partner to be your best friend. So I do ask them to sit down. I was like, well, what do you think makes a good friend? And then what do you think makes a best friend?
Yeah.
Those qualities are what I love for my clients to focus on. Attraction fades and it comes in so many different varieties that it's hard to pinpoint just one thing. I was like, normally people have a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B and C for physically what attracts them to a person. But I was like, I'm really interested in column P, column personality. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because you said that's the thing that's going to sustain whether your relationship lasts a week or if it lasts a lifetime.
And I think it's Esther Perel that speaks to this, but she's like, if you're in a long-term relationship, you're falling in love continuously with different versions of who your partner is.
Yeah.
Right? Every so often they change part of their identity. They change what they're following or what their interests are, or who they're becoming. As you're changing as well, having to come back to each other to
Right.
have different attraction and to keep coming back in that circle, right? And so a big piece of that is the communication around that. And so to me, that would be a need is, can you communicate throughout all these different identities that you will have over the lifetime, right?
Yes. And in communication, that's something I love talking about, especially when we're in the space of conscious dating, because to me, communication doesn't just mean verbal. There are a lot of nonverbal communication that I feel like people don't always pay attention to, but is really crucial in sustaining a
Mm-hmm.
certain level of happiness and understanding, not only with yourself, but with your partner as well. Would
Yeah,
you agree?
definitely. And from, I guess, my perspective and how I coach, a lot of what I like to teach or share is like, you need to know what a yes or a no feels like in your own body,
Ooh,
right? Like that's
okay.
something that some people don't even, a lot of the work I do is somatic or embodiment work where you're like working with the sensations that arise
Hmm.
in your body. And so, when you're like invited to something like a concert with your best friend that you've both been dying to go to and how you like your body just reacts to that and you're like, yes.
Yeah.
And then, something really gross that you're like, ugh, no, like not a chance. But to actually have that awareness of how that feels in your body. So when you're dating and you're doing different experiences, you can notice, like you can drop into your body and be like, where am I on this scale? Is this a yes or a no?
Yeah.
Right? Because it can have all these red flags and you're like, oh, maybe, yeah, I think I'll give it another chance, like maybe one more date or whatever, when really your body's saying like, hell no. Right. And that's like, yes, there's intuition, but then there's also just your body sensations as well.
I love the fact that you said this, what's a yes or no in your body? Because I feel like a lot of times people, what's the saying? Ignorance is bliss. People will ignore almost anything because they think that they need a relationship. And I was like, first and foremost, no, you don't need a relationship, guys. Relationships are nice, but if you are not in a happy one or an authentic one, then what's the point? Do you really want to spend the rest of your life playing the part of the perfect partner and not just being you? Because I don't know about you, but that seems exhausting.
It's crazy what people will tolerate just for the fear of being alone.
Yeah.
If you actually do the inner work, you really enjoy being alone with
Being
yourself.
alone.
And then you only allow people in that can give you that same energy. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like people are naturally attracted to your energy once you do the work because you have your own comfort levels and you can do your own things, right? Like you know what's a yes and what's a no, you know your boundaries, you can speak your truth, like, and people love that in other people, right? Like I know for me, even when you watch like a musician play a beautiful piece and they're just like in it, right? That's what you get attracted to. You're like, wow, that's beautiful to see that. And it's the same with people that have self-love and confidence. Like you can see it in them, right? And it's not arrogance. It's just genuinely, you can tell that they've done the work to be with themselves on all
Right.
levels, not just the happy go lucky, but like the shadow work too.
The more time I've spent actually learning to heal and consciously think about what makes me happy, what am I looking for, what are my just goals in life, the more I've experienced a personality shift. I think when I was younger, I was a lot more extroverted because I needed the acceptance, I needed the eyes and attention of others out there. But now I was like, I find myself with slightly more introverted qualities. People are like, they don't forget that I exist, but they're like, what do you do? I feel like I haven't seen you in ages. And it's like, I like me. I can spend so much time with myself and be happy, not complacent, and be happy, be fulfilled that I don't need to go out and do X, Y, and Z because I'm having a good time.
Exactly. And that just goes to show A, the work you've done, but B, the partner that you'll attract will have similar qualities. And then you don't need to complete each other. You can literally just share the love that you
Yes.
have for each other on each other. I don't want someone in my life that feels that I have to complete them. That's so much pressure. That's just
That's
like
why
unbeatable.
I hate this phrase, where's your other half? I was like, I don't have another half. I'm a whole being. I'm complete. I'm happy. You
Yeah,
know.
I'm enough. Trust me.
Yeah. I have a twin flame. I have a
Yeah,
partner, who
yeah,
adds value to my life. I was like, no, I'm not looking to be completed. I'm not a
exactly.
quiz. I'm not a
Yeah.
Sudoku. Well, I'm glad I met somebody else who also has that same ideology that we don't need to be completed.
It's so rare. And people are just looking to be almost rescued in a sense. And I think that at least for my generation, like growing
Ooh.
up with Disney movies, and
Yeah,
all you
yeah,
see is coming in to rescue the lady, and they never show the happily ever after. Like, what is the happily ever
yeah.
after, right? They don't show that aspect of it. It's just like the start and the sparks and the rescuing and all that. And I think the biggest piece for me was taking full, like, radical responsibility for everything that occurred in my own and stop placing the blame on everyone else. And like that victimhood, as soon as I got rid of that, it was a game changer.
Personal accountability is the forefront of my program and any relationship I have with anybody. Like if you can't take accountability for what got you in your situation, then I can't really surround myself with you because you can only be the victim so many times. You can only blame so many other people before I feel like what are we doing here? Like once again, we're acting again. I was like, even though I have a theater degree, I don't need to perform all the time. Okay, there's a time and place for that. When I'm on the stage, I don't need to do it in my everyday life.
Yeah. And I love that though, right? Like you've done the work to know that. And it kind of happens as like a natural repellent almost. Because you're like, yeah, I'm not going to tolerate that's BS. Like I'm going to call you out on it, which will
Yeah,
just cause friction anyways, right? So it's crazy how when you do the inner work, it kind of reflects out on all relationships, regardless of if it's romantic or not. It's kind of like all levels because you're showing up as who you want to be. And so that affects your job, your, everything
Exactly.
day to day.
And that's funny. I love that you said that because when I first started this endeavor, everybody's like, what does a guy know about relationships? And I was like, well, that just shows me how limited your belief or perspectives are because A, you broke relationships down to a romantic sense only.
Mhm.
But I was like, no, we deal with so many relationships on a daily basis that have a domino effect or so interconnected that if you improve or focus on one, it's bound to have a ripple. Whether it's you starting with yourself, whether you are starting a new and better work environment, all these things play a part into the next role. So I was like, it doesn't matter where you start, as long as you're taking the time and investing in that relationship.
And getting real about what you want.
Yeah.
Like, if you can have that honesty with yourself, then you'll start attracting that. But if you're making up excuses for why this person can treat you this way or that, show up half-assed, then that's on you ultimately. Like, you're allowing that into your life too, right? So it's a big piece of that is like getting real about it, getting the clarity, getting the awareness. Like it sounds so simple, but yet it's like a daily practice. Like, there's so many situations in your day to day that you have choice. And once you have the awareness that you have choice, then that's where it really begins, right?
Yes. Now, I want to get into breathing and breath work because I know you have a style that you like to practice that you get into. But before I get into this, let me know if you agree. I feel like we're never really taught the fundamentals of dating or connection, but we're shown all these advanced practices, like they're like, hey, here's what a quote unquote successful relationship looks like, or here's a goal, but we've never been given any building blocks. How do you, or do you go back with some of your clients and try to give them those basic fundamental building blocks to what you believe is a successful relationship?
That's a great question. I love that. And truthfully, I don't feel like there is a successful relationship per se. I think
Mm,
it really is determined on what two or three people, like whatever type of relationship you're in, if you're polyamorous or if you're, there's so many different varieties, but what works for you that also works for your partner and having that
yes.
communication. As long as whoever is in the relationship is on the same page and communicating about it, to me, that's successful, right? As long as you're working towards the same goals and you have a similar vision. But I don't feel like, and I think that's why there's such a high divorce rate too, is those conversations aren't being had around that, right? It's like, we'll get into this relationship, well, after a year or two, they're engaged in getting married, but they haven't had the conversations around the values or long term or what their expectations are. And so to me, being able to communicate and have those difficult conversations is what makes success in a relationship. That you can communicate and like speak your truth, but
Hmm.
also be able to listen to your partners and then find a compromise on that, I guess.
It's okay if you both speak your truth and then you realize maybe this isn't the right partner for me. Avoiding those difficult conversations doesn't mean that you'll have a longer, happier, or more quote unquote successful relationship. It just means you're delaying the inevitable. To me, I agree. The most successful relationship is just one with understanding and communication. I was gonna be like, if we can understand each other and we keep communicating, no matter how many times we evolve or change, we'll keep choosing each other. That to
Mhm.
me, that's my end goal. That's what I try to establish in my own life. So of course that's what I project to my clients or anybody else who knows me is I just want to keep choosing my person. I
Yeah.
don't want us to have, I mean, having a 5, 10, 20 year goal, that's great. You want to plan. But I was like, no, I was like, I just like a day-to-day plan.
Yeah.
Because if I can choose you today and not choose you tomorrow and then the day after, eventually we're going to hit all those milestones, you know? But it's the minute that I feel like we stop thinking about today and tomorrow and we just try to think of next week, next month, a year from now. There's so many little details that start to pile up, which causes us to crash.
I figure that some of the biggest areas of conflict are instantly putting the blame on the other person, right? Whenever there's conflict, it's, well, they did this or they did that, instead of taking responsibility for your own and like taking a pause, stepping back, working with whatever is happening in yourself, and then coming back to the relationship, right? To have that communication. But it's like, it really falls down to like, how are you reacting? How are you showing up day to day? How are you choosing your partner? How are you
Yeah.
doing all these things? And if you can trust them to do that for themselves, then you can do that for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think the other biggest thing too, like you said, like we're never taught about relationships. We're taught by how we're raised, our friends. But if we're getting dating advice from our single friends, it's not really helping either. Right? Like it's kind of like a mixed bag of like, well, they had a similar situation, so now they're going to dump that situation into what you're experiencing as well. So it's very, I think that's the great part of the coaching, is it comes from a third party perspective that's not
Right.
on either side.
We never tell you what to do. Your friends, I feel like your friends, they don't give you advice. They give you instruction. And I was like, I feel like as a coach, I was like, we give people information and perspective, and we're like, fill in your Mad Lib however you want to.
Yeah. Well, and we listen differently too, right?
Yeah.
Like we can pick up on the things that they're not saying, even though they're saying it.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to mention too that you spoke to earlier, but this is the biggest thing I try to get across to certain clients, is people don't have to be bad people for it to not work out. Like you can be both two amazing people and it's still not click. And so you don't have to demonize whoever it's not working out with. They don't have to be an asshole or a jerk or a bitch or whatever, like for it to not work. It's just sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. Now you know. But it's always the like drama wrapped up in it. And I think you spoke to that, where it's just like, okay, after a while you just realize it didn't work.
Yeah.
And you can leave it amicably. It doesn't have to be dramatic on every single time, right?
That's a beautiful lesson that I learned really young in life. I don't think it's unfortunate. It's just the way life happens. My parents weren't together. But one of the first lessons I actively remember my mother teaching me is civility. Growing up, she never spoke an ill word about my father or anybody else, like on their side of the family. She was like, no, they're the people that they like being and who they're destined to be. And they'll keep connecting like that. But just who he was, who I was, it just didn't work. And that just baffled me. I was like, well, aren't you sad that didn't work? Or didn't you want to be like a family or like all this other stuff? And as I got older, she just kept giving me layers and layers and layers upon that. And you're right. I was like, you don't have to demonize them. You can like the person. And this is something I do with all my exes. I was like, and I strive for my clients to do the same, is take out the adjectives when we or the descriptors when we talk about our exes. I was like, no, they're just people. Okay. Just because it doesn't work out, like you said, doesn't mean they have to be the bitch or the et cetera, et cetera. I was like, no, they're not. Now, sometimes there are some ones where I was like, okay, you're valid. But for the most part, I was like, no, you're just two people who just two puzzle pieces that didn't really go together. And that's okay.
But ultimately, I think too, like when people are like, oh, they showed me their nasty side, I'm like, good. Now you're out. Yeah. Now you're not trapped in that for years. Like, imagine being with that continually. Like, it's good that you saw that early on, right? Like, it's a blessing in disguise. And I hate to say it like that, but sometimes it's good when things don't work out, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, I feel like there are countless love songs about that where things didn't work out. You go back home 10 years from now and they're happy with kids or, living a whole nother life. So, or movies or like whatever you're into. That's a trend for a reason because it happens. It's life. Could you imagine if whoever you dated for the first time was the only person that you ever, like everybody's first was also their last?
Yeah, I have friends that are married to their like high school boyfriends, and I'm like, I don't know how you did it. I look back in mine, and I was like,
The amount of growth where I am 20 years ago is not where where I am today.
Even my partner and I, like, we're like, if we would have met back then, we wouldn't have liked each other at all, right? Like, thank goodness we both did our own level of work to get to where we're at to meet when we did. But we just laugh about that, like when we go through old pictures or anything, and you're like, that was you. And so, yeah, I just find it really interesting, the different levels of growth. And some people just choose to not grow anymore, right? Like
Yeah,
there's a level of complacency in relationships as well. So it's finding
that's
that
so
partner
true.
that you want to find, but then also being able to grow with them. I guess what I preach the most is like, if you put in the time now to do the deep work and start showing
Hmm.
up for yourself, and
Yes.
so you can be seen, you can be connected, you can start commitment. That will make every other door easier to open down the way, and you're not carrying your baggage through it all, right?
This is one thing that I feel like sometimes is dangerous in a relationship is when you're too cautious. When things are new and you haven't seen them before, you don't know how to approach them. So you just stutter step or you just completely avoid them. I was like, no, I think part of our job as a coach is to give people new perspectives, new situations to start thinking of. That way, if they ever find themselves in a situation, maybe even years after we like worked together, that they're like, you know what, this isn't something new. I know how to handle my fear about this, my anxiety about this. I know how to communicate through this patch of trouble in my relationship. And once again, I was like, we're never taught that. We're never taught how to communicate effectively. And that drives me crazy. I was like, one thing that I said I want to do is eventually go into a school system and just revamp
I've been saying
the
that
things
too.
we're taught. You literally have to spend the rest of our lives communicating with people,
Mm-hmm.
but we're never taught how to do it. We stop
Yeah.
at here's the same language that you speak, English, Spanish, or whatever you speak.
Yeah.
That's as far as we're going to help you communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, what? Yeah.
I feel like ultimately it comes down to be able to communicate to others, like to speak your own truth, but also through all of all of my relationships. To me now, I'm realizing it all comes down to everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants love. Everybody wants acceptance, to feel safe, to feel belonging. And when we don't receive that from other people, that's when, the toxic side or whatever can come out. But that's just hurt. That's just
Yeah.
fear. That's just rejection. That's not knowing how to process those emotions. And so, yeah, if you want to attract this amazing, loving, top level relationship, then you also have to go into all the mud and work through all that stuff, because that's part of it, right? You can only experience
Mhm.
as much joy and pleasure as you can through all the depth and darkness as well.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most beautiful journey you can have to open your heart, is to go through your expansion and contraction of the darkness and the light, experience you wholly, and then share that with another being.
I know sometimes it seems like we're playing tennis, guys, and we're going back and forth, reiterating the same point. But the reason we do that is because it's such a big point. If you were listening to this, both Kari and I both want you to take at least this one thing away: is it's okay to be yourself, and the person that you are with or that you are looking for should also want that as well and accept it. Because if they don't accept your authentic self, then they're not your person. I don't think this could be a true Bachelor Pad episode if we didn't have a quickie. So we're just going to do a couple quick fire questions. Don't think too hard about them. I love asking this to my fellow coaches, especially. What
Mhm.
is your favorite way to show intimacy?
To show intimacy. What do you mean by intimacy? Like with my partner, or just people in general? To be intimate, like to be open?
Mhm. Um, let's
Yes.
start with your partner.
So intimacy for me is presence. Regardless of what we're doing, it's being fully present in it. It's being listening to what he's actually saying, discussing whatever we need to discuss, or, like it's being fully present in the moment with whatever is arising.
I love that because to me, that speaks to the love language of quality time. But the next step up, I had a guest on, his name was Paul, and he spends a lot of time talking about the five love languages. But he was like, that's just level one. All those languages build and expand into a deeper, more personal, or more vivid activity. And it's not just being present, spending the time, it's being conscious while you're spending the time. So I love
Exactly.
that. This is a new one that I'm adding to the roster because recently I had ended a relationship and I got to talking. I was like, have you ever had a breakup playlist?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Always. That's what gets me through. I'm all about music on
Yeah.
every level. So, yes,
So I got to
definitely.
know what's on the, give me 2 songs that are on your breakup playlist?
I think anything like Queen Herbie is like my jam right now.
Okay.
Just on the like get shit done, like the attitude of like, this is me, this is how I'm showing up kind of thing. That's definitely, yeah, I don't have any top breakup songs right now though, but like any strong, independent woman. I'm all about any of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
I think it's so funny. I made my breakup playlist in 2013, I think.
Mhm.
And to this day, I was like, I don't think I've added anything to it. I was like, it does the job every time. Okay. 10 plus years later, I was like,
Yeah.
it still makes me feel all the feels. Okay.
You need to share that as like a freebie. Just here's
Yeah.
my playlist.
I was like, guys, after our workshops, you probably won't need this, but in case you do, here's added bonus.
It's just such a game changer to have music.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Honestly, I'll also say this. I feel so much better after a good cry. I'm a man who can say that. I was like, I cry. I have a full range of emotions. I'm not ashamed of that. But after a good cry, I sleep so well.
But that's the big piece of like somatic work, right? You've released something from your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so you all the trauma is stored in your body. And that's, I think, a piece that people are becoming more aware, like have more awareness of now is, yes, I'm all for therapy. I completely support all of that, but talking can only get you so far versus moving it through your body.
Right.
So there's different forms of releasing, right? And crying is one of them. And that's kind of where I think we kind of got sidetracked on the breath work, but that's the breath work.
Yeah.
That's the movement. That's all of the things to get it out of your body, the shaking, the tapping, all of those things, right? And so once you can move that out, your body can go back to, or always trying to get to homeostasis and just your calm state, right? So that's why you sleep so well after a good cry. And I think everyone does.
Listen, guys, if you were having trouble sleeping, maybe you just need to cry.
Just let something out, whatever's in there, let it out.
This one was actually brought up by a guest, and I love it. She challenged me to, she was like, can you name one person that you've been dying to work with, but haven't had the opportunity yet? As a coach, we spend a lot of time just working with ourselves and our clients, but have you ever wanted to partner or in any sense just with somebody else?
Yeah, there's tons. I think my biggest journey is on the path of tantric. So just taking more training towards being a tantrika along the way. I fell in love with this. And as soon as I stepped into it, I came into full alignment. So I've already trained under Layla Martin, which is a well-known tantrika, I guess. And so I just want to continue the journey, but there's so many out there that I don't have, I guess, specific names, but that's definitely, and to me as well. And I'll just say quickly, like, I always want to be with a coach. Like, I think for me to be a great coach is to also be getting coached continually.
Yes.
Right? Like I'm all about self-development, and that's just something that I strongly believe in. So
I still go to therapy every once in a while. And the reason I work with so many other coaches is because I believe perspective is the key to evolving. So the more perspectives I get, the more avenues that are opened within me and my eyes, the better I can help people, because I was like, we always try to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, but if you don't know what type of shoes they're in, or, I was like, try to put me in a stiletto. I've never worn a heel in my life, so I'm going to be tipsy-turvy all day. So, but if I can work with somebody who can teach me how to walk in a heel, then I have a better perspective to help somebody else who, was that an outlandish metaphor? Yes, it was, but that's kind of my name.
Though, right? Like like everybody has a story, and that's the beauty of it. And I love that you speak to that, because it just goes to show how open your heart is for collaboration, right? I grew up in a place where women were always in competition with me, and I never understood that. And so there's a lot of things that I got bullied on or rejected from without even knowing, but it was just how I looked or how I acted or the attention I received from someone that they wanted it from. So it took me healing my sisterhood wound and being able to collaborate and open my heart and be open to all of those things, right? That just makes such a difference in the journey. And it shows that you're there with all the collaboration, with the conversations you get to have on like the regular. Like, how cool would that be to have so many different perspectives of not only communicating on like the same page, but like you said, also being able to debate and seeing different perspectives from different levels. I love that.
And my last question that I have for you, what is something that you've always wanted to do, but you just haven't taken that first step yet?
Honestly, I feel like I'm at the stage in my life where I'm pursuing everything I want. The next step for us is we are selling our house and we are going fully remote for a year. We're just going to basically travel North America. So we're getting a truck and trailer and we're just going to work remotely and just go and experience everything. Because I really love to travel, and that's something that I miss during COVID and shutdown. And we're just at the point in our lives, like, what are we waiting for? Let's just go.
That's true.
Let's just go and
Why wait?
experience it. So that's I guess the next step that we're working towards. That will be this summer sometime. But yeah, everything that I've wanted to do, I am in full pursuit of now. That's just the life I'm living, which is, I'm really proud to be able to say that now.
I mean, and that's beautiful. Not a lot of people really actively take the action steps to live their dream. So the fact that you and your partner have been like, nope, we have a timeline, we have a goal that we want to do. I love that. And that's something that I said I always wanted to do too at some point, is just to give it all away, get an RV and just travel,
Yeah,
So
it's the dream right now. So
yeah, I was like, I can't wait to see your journey as you guys start traveling. I was like, I follow you on Instagram, so I'm pretty sure I'll be getting like little life updates from you.
sure.
But before we get out of here, Kari, is there any last things that you would love to share with our audience? Do you have anything big coming up as far as program or workshop wise?
Nothing crazy coming up. I'm doing a lot of, I guess I should say, doing a lot of live stuff going on in Atlantic Canada. So if anyone's in Atlantic Canada hearing this, there's be a lot of like day workshops around breathwork and embodiment, somatic work for women. And I'm just offering so I do a 12-week conscious container dating, basically heartbreak to healing, and that's online. And so there's 12 weeks of like breath work, somatic work, different pleasure practices. It's a little bit of everything that we talked about here today. And then if they just want to check out my website, it's X's and O's. So it's exs-ohs.ca. And then there's some freebies there. There's a open your heart to lasting love meditation. There's some pleasure practices. There's a lot going on. So yeah.
Alrighty, guys. Well, I will be sure to include her website link down in the description. As always, you know where to find that. But before you guys get out of here, make sure you go over to her page, show it some love, follow her as well if you would like to get a more encompassing view of her work, and just to support an amazing person. And then also feel free to share this with a friend. I highly encourage it because, like she said, we all have the same goal, and that's to be love and to find love. So if this can be somebody's first step, don't you kind of owe it to them to share this? I think so. And I already know you hit that like, you've subscribed to the show so that you can get updates for any and every new episode. And you give us 5 stars because today was a quality episode. I had the easy part. I just had to ask the questions. Kari showed up today and kept you guys entertained and fulfilled. So like I said, I will see all you amazing people on the next episode of the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad. Until then, peace.